Quite a nice way to introduce yourself. You just popped in and then your name just appears on the screen.
As the recording starts as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can start hearing some.
Quite a nice way to introduce yourself. You just popped in and then your name just appears on the screen.
Right, that seems to be working.
Yeah.
So we're live on YouTube as well. Okay. Right. Is everybody happy? So I should really do that as, are we all pumped? Are we all ready? Okay, so shall I just hit broadcast then, yeah?
Go for it.
Okay, let's see what happens. Oh, well, the number of attendees is going up, so that's good. There's going to be somebody here.
It's always reassuring, isn't it?
Right then, folks, we'll just wait till we see the number of attendees going up. Oh, somebody's already saying good morning in the chat. Hello, Tom Wicks. Our good friend, Tom.
We should probably mention to everyone now that if you're speaking in the chat, you're automatically set to only speak to the panelists, which is the hosts and the speakers. You may want to change it so to all panelists and attendees so that you get to speak to everyone.
Apparently Bristol is soggy. Okay. Yeah, we got sunshine in Leeds. Somebody from Pacific US. Morning from the Trossachs. All right. Oh, we just hit 100 attendees there. Okay, I was going up more and more. Right, if you've never been an attendee before in a Zoom thing, you don't have, you're not able to speak unless you're given permission, unfortunately. But anyway, we'll just wait for the numbers to go up before we start properly. I think it's a while since we had one of these in the morning, so give people a chance to wake up. When I spoke there, it didn't spotlight me, did it? Something funny going on there. Lawrence is being spotlighted more than anyone else. There we go. Spotlight myself. Oh, thank you, Julia. We can see you. Oh, that was to all panelists. So yeah, if you're exceed on purpose. If you are joining the chat, make sure if you want to broadcast to everybody, that you set it to all panelists and attendees, because otherwise it'll just go to all panelists. And we'll just wait for a while. Numbers are slowing down a bit, I think. You can see I'm back in the office with or rather the room with the lovely Mandel map. Oh, hello, Kenya. Hello, Gibraltar. We're really getting them today, aren't we? Right. So it is 9:50. So maybe it'll start with sharing a screen. Oh, this is good. Start again. Right, come on. Don't mess me about. There we go. Total professionalism here. Right, what should now be happening is that you should see the PowerPoint for today and put it in slideshow mode. Right, should we kick off then? Okay, I'm getting nods. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll have a brief pause so that when it comes to edit this video, there'll be a nice place to start recording, start the actual video. Top tip for you there. Right, hello everybody, and welcome to this latest edition of TALMO. I hope you all had a good rest over the summer, because it looks like we're going to have a pretty busy year, trying to move all our teaching online. So I'm Kevin Houston. I'm one of the people from TALMO. The others are Rachel Hilliam and Michael Grove. And in some sense, we're coming from the Learner Societies, the LMS, the London Mathematical Society, the IMA, and the RSS. And today, well, we're just kind of setting up the web page and the video system so that other people can come along and present things, and in fact organize things. And so the organizers today, as you can see, are Claire, Rob, and Lawrence. So I'll be handing over to them in a few minutes and then disappear until the end. But anyhow, I want to tell you a little bit about future events. So the next one we've got is on the 18th, and that'll be by John Mason. It's going to be about examining. It's probably going to be the morning. It's not all quite firmed up yet, but I thought I'd give you advance warning, because obviously examining is going to be a big thing. How do you write your exams? Many of us will have had some practice in the last round, but it would be good to this time round to be able to set up our exams, not just afterwards, as it were, after we've done most of the teaching. So John, I'm sure you all have heard of John, but if you haven't, then go and look him up, get some of his books. But here we're talking about examining. So the next big one will be on 21st of September. So a number of people asked us last time, could we do something on lab type work, dealing with computers? How do we, how are people supposed to do that in the era of COVID? So there is so we're doing that. If you want to give a talk, give a presentation, then have a look at the online. Oh, I should have. what I forgot to do was get the chat set up here. So could somebody put the link to that in the chat, please? If they could go to the TALMO website. Well, actually, forthcoming is more on writing exams. So if I go to the next next slide, I can show you that there's a website. So if you go to the website, then up the top there is a bit that says events. Click on events. It will take you to the page which lists what's going to happen next, what's happened, and some videos and chat and all that sort of stuff is uploaded there. So if you go to there, then you can actually see how you can propose a talk there. And so the deadline for that was, I think, the 9th of September, 5 o'clock on 9th of September. So there we go. So presumably that's British summertime. Right, okay. Hopefully the recordings for this event will work and we'll be able to put them online. At the moment I'm recording and it is actually going out live on YouTube. So if you wish to change your name on Zoom, please do it now. If you don't want to be identified, you can change your name. And I think, I mean, that's just about it. We won't be using the raise hand facility, and I don't think we're going to be using the Q&A, so it's going to be slightly different this time round, but the organisers will be able to tell you all that. So I think without further ado, I'll hand over to Claire. So Claire, over to you.
Great, thank you, Kevin. So welcome to this TALMO event. It's on student interaction and engagement. I've personally got to grips, I think I've got to grips with the technology. I'm now at the point where I'm starting to kind of question about how do I get all the students engaged? How do I create that sense of community? And I think there's quite a lot of people in the same position. So that's kind of what this TALMO event's about, is getting the student interacting with staff, with students, engaging with the material and engaging online as well. So we've kind of set this workshop up, bearing in mind that some people will be teaching entirely online, a mixture of both. So hopefully you'll get lots of ideas to use in your own teaching practice to create that sense of community and get students actively involved. So today we're wanting active participation. So we're doing things slightly differently in terms of question and answers. So you'll see that there isn't a question and answer button at the bottom. Instead, we're using something called Padlet. I'll just post the link. Oh, Lawrence has done it as well in the chat. Oh, no, I haven't done it to everybody, but Lawrence has done it anyway. So we've got a Padlet, and what that is we've got, let me show you it. So I recommend Chrome. I don't think it works in Internet Explorer. What we've got is this. So we encourage you to contribute ideas. It doesn't have to be anything to do with what the speakers are saying. There's going to be a collection of lots of useful things that people can come back to. So feel free to add things at any point. And we're actually going to have the question and answers through this. So if you've got a question, post it here. And then what's going to happen immediately after each talk, one of the organisers is going to select a couple of questions to ask the organisers in front of everybody, to ask the presenters in front of everybody. And then they're able to go on to this later on. But there might be quite a lot of questions and we want you to be involved as much as possible. So feel free to start answering questions that other people have posed, even if you're not one of the presenters. It'd be really useful to include your name and university if you're willing to do that. You can do that by either signing up and logging in, or just kind of writing at the end of the post your name and your university there. So we encourage you to use that throughout. We know people will be dipping in and out throughout the day, so we'll keep kind of mentioning that as we're going along. So we've also got the chat as well. So we're not using that for questions. If you do have a particular question for a speaker, do use the Padlet for that. It's just for general chit chat really. And as has been mentioned already, if you can make sure that it's selected to all panelists and attendees, I think the default is all panelists, which means that only kind of the organisers and the presenters get the questions, and well, not the questions necessarily. As I said, the questions are going on Padlet. So the comments need to go to panelists and attendees if you're writing in the chat. I make it just about 10 o'clock, so it makes sense to move on to our first speaker. So we hope you enjoyed the morning. As I said, get involved as much as possible. We're keen to hear about what you're doing as well as what our presenters have been doing as well. So I'm going to hand over to Amanda in that case.
Thanks, Claire. I'll share my screen. There we go. So, morning everyone. My name's Amanda Shaker, and I'm going to be talking today about adapting to online teaching at short notice, basically. So, I probably haven't met a lot of people here, so I'll just introduce myself quickly to start with. So my name's Amanda Shaker, and I am an early career teaching focused academic at La Trobe University in Melbourne, Australia. I'm a statistics lecturer, and I teach students from both statistics backgrounds and non-statistics backgrounds. And I live in Melbourne in Australia. So that's a little bit about me. So just a little bit of background about this talk and what it's about. So until March of this year, the entirety of my teaching was face-to-face and or blended. I'd never taught a fully online subject before. I think probably a lot of people in the UK call a subject a module. I'd call it a subject, but same thing. Since March 2020, I've been teaching fully online. So our teaching year starts in March. So we had 1 or 2 weeks of face-to-face teaching, and then and ever since then, it's been fully online, at least where I am in my area at La Trobe. So as you can imagine, that's been quite a quick and unexpected change. So I'm going to be talking today not from the perspective of somebody who is an expert in online teaching, but from the perspective of somebody who has needed to adapt within a short time frame. So I'll talk first of all about Kahoot, classroom polling with Kahoot. I'll give a little bit of background about classroom polling and about Kahoot, and then I'll talk about my experiences with it in general, but then I'll talk about how I've adapted to using that online. And then just briefly at the end, I'll talk about just a few other reflections in general about online teaching since March of this year. So we're probably all fairly familiar with what classroom polling is, so this background will be very short, but a brief definition of it. Classroom polling allows instructors to quickly ask a question and instantly receive responses from students during class. So there's obvious benefits to doing this in class. Some of the positive, at least the positive research-based outcomes: increased engagement and interaction, lectures less passive and less impersonal, improved understanding and learning even of complex material. Another one, students are more likely to ask and answer questions, which is always great. And students not alone in their confusion or misunderstanding. Improved student performance, increased attendance, and increased identification of student misconceptions. So there's a lot of good reasons to do it. Now, the particular classroom polling platform we'll talk about today is Kahoot, although there's lots of different platforms. So, you know, different people have different preferences. So there's Poll Everywhere, Slido, Clickers, Zoom polling, Mentimeter, Socrative, and others. And with a group this large, there's probably all of these have been used by somebody here. So, so I guess a lot of what I say today about Kahoot would apply to these as well. I don't really have any experience with any of them except for Zoom polling and Kahoot. So that's a bit of a background on classroom polling. So Kahoot in particular, it's a game-based learning platform. And it's used in schools a lot and also other educational institutions. It was launched in August of 2013 in Norway, and it's learning games or Kahoots. They're mostly multiple choice quizzes. There's other types of games as well, but predominantly it's multiple choice quizzes, and students can play on whatever device they like. Most of the time they'll be using their phone, but you can play from a computer or any other device as well. So a couple of quotes in the literature about Kahoot. Kahoot enriched the quality of student learning in the classroom with the highest influence reported on classroom dynamics, engagement, motivation, and improved learning experience. It fosters a sense of community. Kahoot is a fun and effective platform for formative feedback. So these are some really nice things, and I've certainly experienced a lot of those things in when I have used Kahoot in my teaching as well. So these, in my own teaching, these are some of the themes of what students have talked about when they've given feedback about using Kahoot in the classroom. Words like fun and engagement, enjoyment, worthwhile, friendships, interesting. There's a lot of positive themes coming from the students. Obviously, the bigger the cohort, the less uniform that positive feedback is. There's always going to be a bigger range of opinions the larger the group is. But I would say predominantly students have been really positive about using this. So an example of what it actually looks like. This is, I guess, the results of this particular question. Is no surprise that not all students have statistics as their favourite subjects, particularly when they're from non-statistics backgrounds. But this is one way Kahoot can be used, just to get a bit of an idea of student perceptions. Another way it can be used, so often I'll just use it for 5 minutes at the end of a lecture. When I have perhaps a smaller cohort, I sometimes will have a running leaderboard throughout the semester, because every Kahoot you'll get, the students will get a certain amount of points, and those points can build up throughout the semester. So I wouldn't do that with every group, but perhaps for a smaller cohort who was keen to do that, have a running leaderboard. So you get that sense of friendly competition. I've even had students playing from home or from work. They get their classmates to send them the PIN number, and they'll join in from, they can't even see the question or the answers. All they can see on their phone is the colours, but they'll join in just because it's fun and they want to get the points. And I'm completely fine with that, because it means that by the time they come to the next class, they're still feeling a part of the group. And so we ended up with, lots of running jokes throughout the semester, end of semester winners sometimes if we've got that running leaderboard. So these are some of the ways it can be used, and you can be really creative with it. You could use it to check comprehension of readings at the start of a class. You can use it to begin class discussion, practice problems, so you can give, I think, up to 4 minutes to answer a question. So you can use it for more involved questions if you like as well, or revision at the end of the semester. So there's a lot of different ways it can be used. So that's all in the normal context of face-to-face teaching, but how can it be adapted online? So, so this is probably what we all want to know about. So Kahoot and probably other polling platforms as well can be used in these ways. So firstly, synchronous polling in a face-to-face session. The second one, synchronous polling in an online session. So if I wanted to, I could share my screen with you now and we could do a Kahoot now. All you need is the PIN and a device. Or asynchronous polling in an online environment. So normally in a face-to-face context, I would use option 1, synchronous polling in a face-to-face session. Occasionally I do asynchronous, but mostly it'd be option 1. When we moved to fully online teaching back in March, this is what I did in semester 1. So in semester 1, which runs from March to June, my lectures were asynchronous. So I used Kahoot asynchronously, so that instead of doing it live in the lecture or in a Zoom class, the lecture would be on a video, and then there would be a pin number at the end of that. So you can set a Kahoot as a challenge or for homework. So that's how I mostly used it last semester, in semester 1. There was about a 15 to 30% uptake, which is pretty comparable to normal lecture attendance. Obviously, this was purely optional. So that was pretty reasonable, I think. And for those students who did choose to do the Kahoots, they enjoyed it, still had that friendly competition happening. And for those who did it, they had really good feedback about it. This current semester that we're in, I'm using the mostly synchronous options. So we'll have like a computer lab, and I'll do the Kahoot over Zoom live. And again, students enjoy that friendly competition. And when I've missed a week or two, they're asking, where's the Kahoots, and asking for more. So it's been fairly good. So my overall reflection on using Kahoot in this kind of context, I'd say, aside from the obvious benefits to learning, it's been, I guess it's, there's probably no argument that this has been quite a difficult year for both staff and students. And it's been a really good way to retain some of that fun in learning and just have something that's a bit more lighthearted. And obviously, it can feel a little bit like talking into a sea of black screens on Zoom sometimes. So it's just one way of helping with the engagement and creating that learning community when it's potentially a bit more challenging in the online environment. A couple of other reflections just briefly before I finish up. So because online learning has been a new experience for a lot of staff and students, I'd say my number one tip would be to check in with students via short polls or surveys, just to see how they're finding things. It's helped me reflect on what is and isn't working and make adjustments as I go. And of course, that's something that we could do anytime, even when we're not teaching online, but without the normal cues that you get in person, and it's just harder to gauge how things are going and how students are going. So I found that to be a really helpful way just to gauge things. A couple of the themes that have arisen in these in the check-ins that I've been doing so far this year. The first, like the most obvious one initially, was that students were finding it a bit hard to keep track of everything. Motivation has been a tricky one as well. It has been a bit harder for some students to stay motivated. That one's probably a little bit harder to address, but it's good to be aware. And potentially, think readings are going to be a little bit more difficult to grasp than normal, but I think that probably depends on context. And all of these things, all of these themes do depend on context and where things are at, dependent on lockdown restrictions and those types of things. So these were the themes that came up in my particular context, but I'd say the key would be just to check in as you go. I found it helpful to check in as I go and adapt as needed. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, and perhaps we'll open it up for discussion or questions.
Thanks very much, Amanda. I'll put the questions in. So first question that came through on Padlet was from Matthew. which is how much can you do on Kahoot for free, and do you need to get universities to pay for what's going on?
Yeah, great question. The answer to that is not static. So it's changed over the last, I don't know, a couple of years since I've been using it. There is now there's a limit on the number of students. I think it's currently 100 students is the maximum now before you have to start paying. But I still haven't actually paid anything to use Kahoot. So I'm still able to do everything I need to do so far for free. So you can do a fair bit. You can do multiple choice quizzes, and you can have up to 100 students in your class for a start, all for free.
And the poll that you put up, the one about, do you hate stats or love stats, was that a real poll? And is that daunting if students come back and say that they all hate stats, or is it actually, can it be useful for the students to see they're not the only ones who are a bit nervous about the subject?
Yeah, great question. So that particular one, that was the first lecture of a particular semester with a cohort of students who were not from a statistics background. So it was really helpful to establish that from the beginning. And I wanted students to know that they could be honest in what they answered to that question. So it was helpful for them to know that I knew and that it was okay if they didn't like statistics. And it was helpful for me to be able to respond to that and say, look, I get it. I know that statistics isn't everybody's favourite subject, and then kind of go from that common understanding. And the perception actually changed by the end of the semester. So luckily they didn't hate stats that much by the end of semester. So I found it a really useful thing to know.
You're doing a good job if they're not hating stats by the end of the semester, if they're not mathematicians to start with. In fact, even most maths students seem to.
At least hate it a little bit. At least hate it a little bit less.
Yeah, that's all we can do, isn't it? I think we've got time for one final question, which is just, have you got any tips on what makes a good polling question?
Yeah, there's all sorts. I guess it really depends on what you want to use it for and how you're using it. The biggest way I've used it has just been at the end of a lecture. And so I've found that helps students to, well, they've said that it helps them pay attention, especially if they want to do well in the Kahoot at the end. But I think it's also very reassuring for them if the questions aren't too tricky, but it's just kind of revising what we've done in the lecture. If they can have a few questions and do that and get them right, then that builds up their confidence and they're getting that formative feedback straight away. So that would probably be a first step if you want to get started with it.
That's great. I will leave the questions at that and hand you back over to Claire then for now.
Great, thank you.
Thanks very much.
So next up, we've got Zara and Bozidar both here. So I'll just get them to. There we go. So whenever you're ready, feel free to make a start.
You ready?
Bozidar?
Ready, yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm not Bozidar Butarat.
And I'm not Sarah Santos.
And let's switch on online. And let's start by switching on your mobile phones and go to this website to vote. We will need this website several times in this talk. There will be a question appearing on your screen once you're in. And it's a very simple question. Just choose the option that best reflects the type of teaching you are doing next term. I'm going to give you some time to answer that whilst I play some music. Right, we're going to look at your answers very shortly. So keep that website open. I'll give you some time to read that. To Schlechte, these are the important aspects of engagement. So that means that the question of how do we engage learners becomes a question of how do we provide challenging, interesting, and satisfying work in our math sessions.
Now, to Big Tang, the engaging work has to be perceived as valuable to the learner and also possible for the learner to complete with a positive outcome. So the question is, how do we do that for students across the world on our International Science Foundation program? So let's see your answers to the first poll here.
Yeah. We'll see what kind of teaching you are doing or you're planning to do. Let's see what we got. If you're going to be online or face-to-face. Oh,
okay, so we have some interesting answers here. So
yeah.
Most people are going to do online sessions. That's interesting. And there is also a hybrid way. So Sarah and I are going to do a mixture of online and face-to-face teaching. Now thinking about the next term, can you use your mobile phones again and tell us how much you agree with the following statement?
It's
again,
same,
you can use the same
website.
poll, so I suppose it should be active again. So we will give you just a few seconds to try and answer this for us as well. Okay,
should we have a look at the answers?
Let's have a look at the answers. Okay, so we have kind of a Gaussian distribution if you turn your head around. Gaussian.
What have you got?
Rules. So we can see that the neutral is the majority, and then after that it's agree. So I think that Sarah and I are feeling reasonably confident that this term will be better than the last term. So back to Sarah.
Indeed.
Okay.
So I want to show yes. So this is what teaching looked like before lockdown. My typical session began with a group activity focused on threshold concepts for that week. Students would come up and write on the board all around us the results of that task. And that will allow me to differentiate learning and make quick decisions about what we're doing. We had time for individual work, board work, as well as presentations from the students, and that's aligned with the assessment for Maths for Social Sciences.
So let me quickly share my screen.
So, yeah.
Okay, sorry guys. So for natural sciences, what I did is I would set essential tasks on the board. Students would then work either on their own or in small groups as they prefer. And then during that, what I would do is I would scan through their notebooks to see their work from the previous week's topics. And then I would also check their individual learning plan, which you can see here on the screen, just to track their progress. And then questions from the current week would be solved on the board by either students or myself. And then in my lectures, I also used poll everywhere to gauge students' understanding. Okay, Sarah, back to you.
Our ad hoc delivery online at the end of the 2020 academic year coincided with the revision period. So the lessons would have been different anyway. Online, we had lower attendance than usual. And we also had the black rectangle audiences that previous speaker talked about. And we used online breakout rooms, reserving one for one-to-one chats with students and divided the other rooms into revision topics. That's how it worked then. We found that the whiteboards and the annotation tool, this one here, on Zoom and on Teams, Microsoft Teams, was not suitable, was too limited for developing mathematical work. So instead, we looked for an external whiteboard, which we're not going to tell you the name now, because I wanted to focus. And we invited students to post pictures of their work on the board. We could annotate it, and we could provide feedback in almost as quickly as in a face-to-face situation. And it also allowed us to then pull the student into the one-to-one room, talk to them with voice, both of us looking at the browser window on the board, annotating it by hand or by typing, and keep that conversation going. And like in a normal class, I could keep an eye on what was being done in the class by looking at different parts of the board. And sometimes I could just give a nudge or keep someone going by type a little message or just say, yes, it's fine. And that felt much more like what was happening in a face-to-face situation. So it was nearly as good, or in sometimes actually better. And I want to emphasize that the participation was not high, but when they did post the question, the interaction was really good. So I think we've got another consultation now. We've got another question.
Yeah, so going back to the engagement components, the challenging, interesting, and satisfying, can you tell us with your votes again what you think makes learning activities satisfying? It could be online, face-to-face, or even outside the classroom. So there should be one more poll, which I activated. I suppose people can see it. Okay. Okay. Got lots of stuff.
That's fantastic. That's fun, learner-centered. Yeah.
Yes, lots of. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, guys.
Fantastic. We want to tap into that for next term, don't we, Bozidar?
Yes, yes. I just have to, sorry.
Yes. So next term, we will be teaching 1 hour long synchronous sessions up to 14 students. Bozidar, you got a plan?
I got the plan, yes. So
that's the list of activities that Bozidar has. You will talk you through.
So these are the activities for the week for academic year 2020-2021. Okay. So if you have a quick look. And then what I will do is I will begin session with probably 2 poll everywhere questions, just to check if students have done these activities. So if they have read the lecture notes, watched the video recordings, and also solved some questions from the, I call it asynchronous exercise sheet. And then that would allow me to gain insight into the students' understanding of the weekly topic. After that, I would then divide students into breakout rooms to solve questions from the second exercise sheet, which I call synchronous exercise sheet. What I would do is I would hop between breakout rooms, help them if necessary, give them a nudge, and just see how it goes. And then after that, we would have like groups would capture their workings, their methods and solutions, and they would post it on the share board, which is the freehand, which Sarah showed recently. And then we would, after that, all go to the main room and then discuss as a class, where were the difficulties. Okay, and here is, for example, one of the poll everywhere questions. This is a cloud type. I would also have multiple choice questions. So these 2 types. And then, as I said, the idea is just to see if students understood the basics of the weekly topics. Okay, Sarah, back to you.
Fantastic. So I will digitalize some of my matching card problems using a PowerPoint where students can move the images around, and that can be done in a shared PowerPoint document over Microsoft Teams. But I've got also a template to organize my lesson. We're using the board, having a shared space where I can coach students to take turns speaking, to even encourage them to participate. They occupy a space with their picture, with their name, and they will have an area for their own work where they post. I'll have a flow chart indicating the next activity, when to ask for help, and really help them become independent learners. And I can have a picture of what's going on by zooming in and out. Now, technology is a tool to enable our pedagogical decisions, and Poll Everywhere feels like it's a great way of gauging where students are and what's their understanding for us to make decisions. And the board is a place to belong to. It's a place to celebrate the work of the students, and is a place to organize the flow of the class. So I think all of that helps with our interesting, challenging, and interesting tasks and satisfying tasks. For more ideas of activities, check out the link I have at the end on my Coursera Maths for Computer Science work, or I have other interesting activities to do asynchronously. We'll share all the links with you, and I hope you are switched on for online teaching. Tell us on this last poll what you liked about our session, and keep the conversation going. We'll share links and our contact details during Q&A. Thank you all, and thank you, TALMO.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us and filling all these polls. We hope we didn't bother you too much with so many polls. So this is the last one.
They've been very keen to vote. It's been an amazing response.
So we have here. Green, I like the okay.
Dynamic.
Cool.
You liked? Oh, fantastic! The screen.
Thank you so much for positive feedback.
Fantastic. Well, keep it coming, and I think we're ready for Q&A. Are we, Bazidar?
Yeah, ready for Q&A.
I got me a cup of tea.
Okay, then I'll get started on the Q&A. And the first thing that came up straight away was people are intrigued by the technicalities of what you're doing, Sarah, with the screen behind you, and want to know how that's happened. So are you willing to share some details on that?
Sure, there are many different ways of doing that. The short answer is export your slides as images and put them on the virtual background on Zoom. You can do that with videos as well. That's one short answer. There are other ways, which I will explore for my next talk.
Excellent. Let's have a quick look at everything else. So you're not the whiteboard that you were using. You said you were going to reveal that later on. Did that?
Yes, it's here. It's the freehand InVision app. All these links that on our references will be available to you, and you'll be able to use the template.
I used it back in March for the few weeks of the online teaching. It worked well, but the problem was kind of engage students to use it more. But as a technology, it worked very well. Easy to use.
Yes.
Excellent. There was a question about potentially the issue of mobile phones versus computers. So here, most people, I think, are watching on a laptop and can then do the polling on their mobile phone. Do you find that that is potentially an issue for students who may watch a seminar, lecture, or event on a mobile phone and then don't necessarily have a way to flick to the polling software, or do you tend to get good responses on that?
I don't think there should be an issue there. I mean, students usually use their mobile phones to answer the polls. I did it in live classes, in lectures, and also, and
yes,
they can use laptops, tablets, mobile phones. Everything works fine.
So
yes,
I think it's more if they're using their mobile phone to watch the session in the first place. Is it then?
So there is another option which we didn't activate for this, but you can allow SMS answers. So the SMS answer would be a easier way to combine if you have a video on your phone.
It can cost. It can cost. I think if you use SMS, it's costly. So they have to pay something. That's why I disabled SMS. I just always use the other option.
Okay, what else is coming through?
Someone asked if I was standing up. I am standing up. Yes.
There's one question, sorry, it's going through all the stuff on the Padlet. So a question about student handwriting. So did your students have tablets for handwriting, or did they mostly post photos?
Oh, they mostly posted photos. And was it the same for you?
The same, yes, the same.
Yeah.
So they would,
And
yes.
I did the annotation by hand on some things because I've got a little digital tablet, the ones for design work, not an expensive one. Yeah, that's one thing I used, but it's very easy to type on here, and you can see on this video there's some typed elements. Yeah, but students,
Yes,
yeah,
they
students
somehow
managed.
found, yeah, they somehow found easier to take a photo of their, you know, work
Yeah.
and then just post it on the freehand.
And sometimes they typed the maths really clumsy, exponentials and stuff, but I made sense of it, and I scribbled for them to make sure that what they wrote in typing was what I understood.
Excellent. That is about it on the questions. But if you, I mean, if you go to the Padlet, there's plenty of other comments, lots of really nice comments about what you've done in that presentation. So hopefully you'll get a chance to have a look at that afterwards. But I think we'll leave that and hand back over to Claire.
Yeah,
Thank
wonderful.
you.
That was great. Thank
Thank you very much.
We're a little bit ahead of schedule, which I don't know quite how that's happened, but it's great. We'll have a couple of minutes breathing time. I recommend having a look at the Padlet if you haven't done so already. So start adding in your own ideas, what you've tried or what you're going to try. I don't know if anybody's posted any of the links that were presented in that last talk, but maybe kind of just spend a couple of minutes just having a breather and just kind of catching up with Padlet and putting things in the chat, and then we'll get going on the next talk. Okay, we'll get going. So next up, we've got Nick and Matthew talking about blended learning. So Nick and Matthew, are you ready?
Yes, certainly. The astute among you will notice I've actually connected to this twice. So because I'm going to talk to you through my laptop and also use my iPad to present. So what I will do then is share my screen on my iPad, and then we'll be ready to go. Okay, so let's make a start, I suppose. So this is joint work with myself and Matthew Jones. The idea is that I'm going to plough through the presentation, and Matthew will join us for questions afterwards. So I want to talk to you about the experiences we've had with recording video lectures both before and after the lockdown period. I'm not a person to let a good pun go to waste, so the talk is split into two halves. There's the ingredients and then adding it to your blend. So the ingredients is the background information. So from 2017, we started experimenting with videoing whiteboards as a way of getting lecture content that students could look at in the future, rather than just going to a single lecture once and having to use their memories. And so we produce lots of videos that look a little bit like this. And as you can see, you can barely read any of the whiteboards at all. And this wasn't hugely effective in terms of producing quality content. But nevertheless, the students actually loved this. The simple fact that they could relive the lecture more than once proved to be very popular in all the surveys that we did. But we decided there's a lot of work to actually set up the video for this. So to try and make better quality videos, in October 2018, we actually issued all the specialist math staffs with iPads, pencils and dongles to better produce these video lectures. So the workflow was something like this. So we would prepare slides, which is optional, but we can just scribble directly on a blank PDF if we liked. We would then use the iPad to present in a very similar way as I'm doing now. So this would mean either kind of dongling into a projector or connecting wirelessly. One of the advantages of a wireless connection in a lecture room is that you could actually wander around the classroom while presenting information. We would then handwrite on the slides that using the Apple Pencil. And at the same time, we would be recording both the screen and the audio. There's a technical reason why you shouldn't use the native iPad screen recorders to do this. And then you'd have a beautiful video of slides with audio and video content being added in real time, which you can then upload to your learning management system. So we use Moodle, or a flavor of Moodle at least. So here's an example of one of the, my apologies. Here's an example of one of the what a lecture would look like. So here's a familiar theorem from second year analysis. So we could present information like this and then just simply annotate it. So one of the key things in this proof is to try and understand what this object is. And we can do this by sketching away. So here is some space X, here's another space Y, and there's a map T which goes between them, and you get the idea, right? So we can kind of add this video, and then this video is available afterwards. Okay, so that was one ingredient. So this was very well received. We adopted this approach in most of the specialist maths modules at Middlesex by September 2019. And between us, Matt and I have done about 200 hours of iPad recorded lectures across the undergraduate and postgraduate provision. All of these are available on our Moodle site for students to watch again. So the students love it. Okay, so we did some kind of surveys to get some feedback from this, and in fact some of them have said that the availability of these videos is their favorite thing about the teaching, and they like exploring it in their own time. They find the recordings are very useful even though they attend the lectures, and it's worth noting we've not actually noticed any drop-off in attendance since we started recording every minute of every lecture. And yes, overall the reception was very, very positive indeed. It's highly utilized. So we find that some students are even kind of stripping out the audio from the videos to listen on their commutes. And we find that most students are accessing the videos around 3 times in addition to attending the lecture. So the students have got are able to view the content, well, a total of 4 times there. So they find that they are very much making use of this stuff. And in fact, when we first trialed this on a few modules, it became highly requested across all modules. And in fact, the modules that didn't have this extensive video recording ended up doing slightly worse in their end of year surveys, with the sole comment being, please video the lectures. So it just goes to show how quickly the students' expectations adapt. So yes, one piece of advice is don't introduce this in a piecemeal way. So the final ingredient, of course, was lockdown itself, right? So in March 2020, we were locked down. We were able to move this delivery very quickly to Zoom using laptops and iPads. So to do exactly what I'm doing now, which is to connect both devices to the same Zoom meeting, okay? So I have my laptop in front of me for engaging with the students and keeping track of who's here and who's paying attention. and then the iPad is to present and annotate. And there are then several options for recording. You can either use the Zoom recording, which I believe is happening, the cloud recording feature. This is also being streamed live to YouTube. But also you can use inbuilt recording on apps. So here, this is the app that I'm using to present your Vittle Pro. I'll give some details about this later. And if you see at the top of the screen there is a timer ticking along this video. The app itself is recording a video, which will be a very clean version with no video of me in it. And just the slides that in the bars at the top, which is a kind of a nice, clean version of the annotated slides. So we found that this transition was in fact totally seamless, and we didn't lose a single hour of lecture when the lockdown was suddenly imposed. So with these ingredients, how can we add this to our blend for teaching in the coming academic year? Well, first of all, some comments about video editing. So the single piece of advice I would have is do not do any video editing as a general rule. You know, we started initially by editing out all the ums and ahs and, dare we say, the occasional error. But it's unsustainable. There's too much work to do to process the volume of video that we were producing. And also, you know, because we are recording live lectures, then the students, they don't have the same level of expectation for the kind of the high quality polished YouTube stuff, especially when the kind of the quantity that we're going to be producing. And in fact, there's also some benefit to this. I mean, I find that the students really react well when I make a mistake. I say why I suddenly realized I've made a mistake, engage them in that process, show them how to correct that mistake, because this is kind of the process that the students will be engaged with a lot in their mathematics education, and it would do them disservice, I think, to edit out how more experienced people deal with getting things wrong and going back and correcting them. Of course, we hope it doesn't happen, but inevitably it does from time to time. Although I said that there should be no kind of editing, I do advocate for a bit of post-processing. So this is the most technical slide in this very short talk. So the fact that I think both Zoom and certainly the recording from the Vittle Pro app, or just using the native iPad screen recording, it does produce kind of quite large files. And there were lots of kind of accessibility issues with having these very large files. So we do want to try and re-encode them. Again, I don't advocate opening these up in kind of video editing suites in order to do that, because that's precious time to deal with that. So I really would advocate learning how to re-encode videos on the command line. So essentially what happens is the video is exported as a .mov file or something like that. And there's a totally free open source video encoding software, FFmpeg, and this single line of code that you can write in the console will turn it into a nice MP4, which is compressed, much more easy for students to access. They can get more on a device. So I would recommend doing your students the service of compressing the files for them. It does take some time, but this can be done overnight if you set it up in an efficient way. What I didn't do, but wish I did and will be doing going forwards, is just bookmark the videos. So here you see that this was a 1 hour 42 video in this example. There's a lot of information in there. So we'd like the students to be able to find specific information quite quickly. So for example, when I talk about definition 3.2, it would be good to put a bookmark there so students can find it easily. So when we first moved online, we did find that there were some kind of issues with students' access to these materials. So, you know, there is this digital divide, or digital poverty is another way it's been referred to. And we can't assume that students have good access to the internet or their own laptop to access these materials. So how can we kind of deal with this? There's another issue, which is that if the student does have a laptop, then we are basically appropriating it as our projector screen and our whiteboard. So if a student is used to using their laptop for note-taking or whatever else, and then we are requiring a portion of their laptop, or maybe even the entire screen to use as a projector, then it makes the students' work less efficient. And this is even worse if the lecture notes we produce are digital lecture notes as well. I mean, we could be having students juggling 3 important screens of information on possibly like a 15-inch laptop. So there's an issue there with moving to this, this online delivery. And one of the big things in mathematics, as we've seen in some of the previous talks, is that we need to see students' handwritten work, ideally in real time. This idea of kind of walking behind students in a seminar and kind of spotting mistakes, say, okay, can you tell me you've missed a step out there, or can you justify that line from this line, or whatever? How do we get that kind of that real-time feedback from students' handwritten work? The plan, how we're going to deal with this, is we're going to have an initial mail shot of printed lecture notes. All the students will possibly be able to collect on campus. We're still working the details out there. And then also with regards to internet access, we want to make sure that any offline videos, so that videos are accessible in an offline way. So they should be able to download the videos, not just make them available on YouTube, but they should be able to grab the videos and then watch at their leisure without requiring an internet connection. So students may be accessing this material by using coffee shop Wi-Fi once a week. So we need to make sure that they can access the material with that modality of accessing the internet. And then how can we ensure students have appropriate hardware to access this stuff? Well, fortunately, we've been able to work out an iPad loan scheme for the specialist math students, so those enrolled on BSc mathematics. So we'll be loaning them iPads and pencils. Although we would also like them to have a laptop, and there is a university loan scheme, the plan is that most of the sessions will be accessible with just an iPad. And the way that we can do this really neatly is by taking advantage of the split screen mode in an iPad. Most tablets have a function like this. So here we have the left-hand side, this is a Zoom call, and then on the right-hand side, these are students' notes that they're making from that lecture. So they're able to access the online video lecture entirely on one device. So just some words about kind of how to encourage this remote engagement. So we found that if we get the videos up quickly, ideally the same day as the lecture, then the students tend to access them more. I would also recommend getting a high quality microphone, so not using and allowing a built-in mic on a laptop. They're typically kind of low quality because although video quality is quite difficult to get right, audio quality really does make people feel like they're in the same room, which helps bring people together, I think. We've had great success using the breakout room feature in Zoom for these video lectures. So for example, with these iPads, with having the students' handwritten notes on the iPad, it means they're able to share this screen of their handwritten notes very quickly and easily so that we can peer over their shoulder and see what they're doing. Also think ahead about how you're going to, if you can get some good analytics on the videos that you produce. So the hosting platform we use is Kaltura. It does give really good analytics. So you see here, there's a graph underneath this video, which shows student engagement with the video over time. And as you see at the kind of 40-minute mark, it starts to drop off quite rapidly. But it does mean that we can see which bits of the video students are very interested in looking at, and then possibly use that to make kind of targeted, polished 5-minute videos about particular topics, responding to the students' use. So that's it. Are there any questions? I have answered some of the usual ones in a direct way there.
There's a lot coming through, Nick. So first of all, thank you for the talk. I mean, first thing that came through in the chat and on Padlet is that there was a lot of love for when you said that you didn't edit the videos.
Right. Okay. Great. Yes.
That seems to have gone down very well. That we're happy that we're not robots and that students can see our mistakes. There was a question to do with that of understanding how you spot your mistakes. So when you don't edit and you show that there's a mistake in there, do you try and explain to students how you've spotted that you've made a mistake?
Yes, so I suppose something like if you take a linear algebra problem where you're expecting to get some real eigenvalues and you don't, something like that, or you have an idea where a solution is going, you accidentally kind of make a mistake and you end up with something kind of that you can't solve for whatever reason. And good mathematical reasons why you've not been able to get the solution that you're expecting. Yeah. Is a helpful thing to signpost to students, because inevitably when we mark a work or provide feedback, there's a kind of, oh, here's where you could have spotted that you've made a mistake. I don't know, did you even try, did you test this solution, test that this was a solution, or something like that. So yes, all of that sort of stuff, it's good to have as a real dialogue rather than just scribbles on a piece of paper they get 2 weeks after the fact, maybe.
Yeah, things like if you ended up with a probability that wasn't between 0 and 1,
yeah, exactly.
Alarm bells start ringing. That
yeah,
kind
absolutely. Yes, we inevitably get scripts from time to time with probabilities bigger than 1, and yes, by making mistakes like that, you do help the students spot similar mistakes themselves, or just get them into the habit of looking for mistakes.
So you may have answered this towards the end. I was sort of looking through questions as you were doing this, but there was a question about bookmarking videos and how do students move to the bookmarks? How does that happen?
So I've not yet, as I said, this is on the wish list. So I've not yet worked out the technical details of this. Well, okay, so there are ways of doing this in Kaltura, for example, which is our online video hosting platform. We can add bookmarks there once the videos are uploaded. What is not immediately clear to me is if those bookmarks are preserved if I then download the video afterwards, because I wouldn't want to have to do the same work twice. In fact, what we could do is enlist the students to actually help bookmark the video. So, okay, look, here's the video, then perhaps go through it and bookmark the important bits. And then it's another way of getting them to comb through the material, make sure they can see what is available in each lecture. I mean, that would be particularly useful for students who are unable to attend the real-time lecture. So, okay, if you're unable to attend the lecture in real time, then please add some bookmarks for everyone's benefit as a way of, well, encouraging student engagement there.
Can I also add something there as well, since my name's down on this talk? No, I mean, in terms of the bookmarking, there is other functionality as well. So there's kind of, you can do pop-outs and pop-out kind of links to other videos as well, which can be quite useful on Kaltura. It's basically the same as a YouTube video. So YouTube does all these things as well. But yeah, there's a lot of kind of functionality. I think both Nick and I have not really tried this very much yet, but it could be really useful in some of the really long recordings. Yeah.
Is there any sort of breakout room functionality as well, so where you can get students to discuss things?
So
well,
yes,
we're using Zoom. So Zoom has breakout rooms.
Okay. And Teams has something similar as well if the university's going down that route. So yeah, that's possible. In that case, I'll have one final question. Oh, something. Let's have a look. Oh, there was one question about how did you project your iPad wirelessly?
Yes. So how did this work, Matt?
Well, we had so there you can buy little dongles that just kind of attach to the HDMI input of your projector. But the universities, I have to say, the universities got the hardware in a lot of the rooms at the university. The hardware is there so you can AirPlay directly into the projector from
I've now remembered the name.
It wasn't just us. The university just installed this in all the rooms so we could do this.
So we use them. They're solstice pods on campus, and the fact it's taken me so long to remember the name shows how long it's been since I set foot on campus. So yes, we use solstice pods in many of the lecture rooms, which allow this wireless connectivity. But any Apple AirPlay product will do it. You could get an Apple TV, and which is the little kind of box that plugs in, and then just plug that into a HDMI port, and that lets you do things wirelessly. But there are many non-Apple solutions. It's just the iPad is the only Apple device I own. But so I'm not a fanboy by any stretch of the imagination. But we use the tools that we were given, and they've worked really well for us.
Yeah.
Excellent. In that case, I will thank you again very much for the talk, and I will hand back to Claire for a minute just to take us into the break, and then we'll have 15 minutes off. So thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to all of our speakers so far. It's been really interesting. We're now at the point where we're going to have a break. So we'll be back at 11:15 with our next set of talks. Keep going with Padlet, grab a cup of tea, whatever you want really, for the next 15 minutes. Sarah's put, somebody's put links for their talk on Padlet, so you might want to have a look at that. As I said at the start, contribute your own ideas, questions, answers, all of that kind of thing on Padlet, and feel free to keep using the chat as well. So thank you to everyone so far.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you, Stephen, as well. Lots of interesting stuff there. And I hope you can carry on with the things out in the chat and obviously in Padlet. We will move on to our next speaker now. I'm delighted to welcome Siddharth Jaggi from the University of Bristol. And he's going to be talking about fully flipped and fully online classes. So Siddharth, over to you.
Thank you. A slight update in my affiliation. I am actually just moving to I have just joined the University of Bristol. I'm still affiliated with the university I was at in Hong Kong, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, where I have been for the past 13 years. So what I'll be talking about in terms of my experiences were actually over the last 5 years in Hong Kong. So that cultural context may be useful to keep in mind. Let me maximize this. Actually, as you know, the pandemic hit us maybe a month or two earlier than you, so we had to segue to online classes in early February. And indeed, previous semester there were political issues, so we also had to suddenly switch to online classes in the previous semester. So even though the context of this class, which I've been teaching for the past 5 years, initially was face-to-face, traditional in-class lectures. But over time it segued to flip classes, and then suddenly perforce online flip classes. So some lessons and some ideas, and I'll focus on some of those. Perhaps more than the technical aspects, like the last speaker, I will focus maybe more on the philosophical underpinnings of what, in my view, makes such a class work. Okay. So to jump into it, teaching math in the best of times can be challenging. This can be one's teaching experience. Student engagement can be a challenge, right? But in the particular class of teaching, just to highlight the level of attainment, so it's a pretty intense class. It's supposed to be a year one, like undergraduate year one, linear algebra and vector calculus class. So first 5 weeks is linear algebra, and then it segues to 4 weeks of vector calculus, with a little bit of finite fields and even some introduction to one week of crash course to analysis thrown in. Just because, this happens to be a very special class. It's much more intense than the normal classes, and students engage with the material. So here are examples of questions that they've been able to solve, theorems they've been able to prove really in exam settings, in time-limited exam settings. They're able to derive the Cayley-Hamilton theorems, Gilbert-Parshimov codes, Rayleigh coefficients for matrices. So they're really able to do a lot, right? Much more than I was able to as an undergraduate, as a year one undergraduate. They do projects on quantum computing. I just view that as applied linear algebra, tomography, game theory. Again, this is way more than I thought I was capable of in my first year of university. So I'd like to step through beyond just the attainments, like what maybe is some of the philosophical underpinnings that I believe helped get to this level of attainment. As I mentioned, this was done in a flipped classroom setting, which almost all of you all certainly already know. In a normal classroom, it's a single point of failure. The instructor teaches, and then So the students have to do work by themselves at home, but in a flipped classroom, the baseline data delivery, what is a definition, what is the basic theorem statement, what is the basic proof, that's done via video lecturing, and then there are interactive exercises done, well, traditionally in a face-to-face setting, in a classroom setting, but due to the pandemic, we had to segue those online and so on. So the first part did not change much. Those videos were still posted before class time online. And then synchronously during classroom time, there were synchronous activities, which we manage via Zoom breakout rooms and so on, which I'll talk about. But again, I'll be focusing more on I believe, the interaction structures rather than on the specific technical details. So the fact that it is flipped at this point perhaps is maybe familiar to many of you. You may have experimented with those things, but I think it helps to think through how to motivate take participation structures within flipped settings to create a community of learning. So let me begin with an anecdote, which I think sets the stage. So there's this really nice book by Michael Sandel at Harvard. So maybe it's fair to characterize his central thesis as that there are at least two primary motivators for human behavior. On the one hand, there's market incentives. It's a zero-sum exchange. I give you A, you give me B. On the other hand, there's community norms. Be polite to people, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, and so on, right? So an anecdote that he has in his book is, well, there's a Israeli daycare center where a perennial problem was, well, parents would be late picking up their kids, right? People have busy lives. And of course, this is inconveniencing to the people who work at this daycare center. So they decide to start fining people who come late. And what happened? Well, maybe predictably in hindsight, people suddenly viewed it as a service. They started paying money, and immediately the number of people coming late was shot up considerably. So this is an example of how a community norm being substituted by a market incentive can actually have a negative outcome. Can actually get you the opposite of what you thought you wanted from here. Okay. So what is the relevance in this context, in the context of teaching and learning, in particular in the context of teaching and learning online? So we view our role as instructors as creating a community of learning where students act as peers, learn from each other. Flipped classrooms are great at doing that. But often the way we instantiate the classroom is like a marketplace. We view the homeworks and exercises and exams they give us as goods. They have to give us a good homework or give us good exams, and in exchange we give them the scarce resource of good grades and so on, right? And predictably, then students, being entirely rational creatures, some examples notwithstanding, what ends up happening is, well, they start focusing on the points, often to the detriment of the actual learning, right? So the thesis here, and I'll give examples from my classroom, is that you can use market style incentives to start nudging behavior deliberately structured in a way so that they start doing things which are better for the learning community. And if you do it in a careful enough manner, then these nudges become self-reinforcing. Even when the nudges are no longer active, then they still behave in a good manner. So I'll give examples, for example, of bonus points. So bonus points get students, starting to teach each other and so on. And then even once they saturate their bonus points, they still keep accumulating them. We have numbers showing the median student blew past their saturation limit in bonus points, just as an example. So as previous speakers have done, I'll be using the Bloom taxonomy as a framing device just to talk through levels of student attainment. And at the baseline level, it's just basic data delivery. What are some of the definitions and theorem statements and so on we want to focus on. At the top level, it's creativity, and all of this again is in the context of a single semester, 12-week semester math class, where at the very end they even had projects to submit on the basis of the linear algebra they were learning, right? So this is a very dense slide, and I don't really expect like everything to come through, but what I'd like to focus on is the following. So there, as an instructor, we design specific learning activities. So for example, videos, interleaved with certain interactive exercises, which students do by themselves at home. And then at the end, we want them to get to something like a project, a capstone style project, which allows them to explore, self-explore with some guidance from the instructor, and these things in a more detailed level. So we'd like them to move up this taxonomy. We'd like them to gain a deep understanding of what they're learning. So there are incentives that you design, and by the way, different pieces of these are interchangeable. The different learning activities, the different incentives that we design, and the different community outcomes can all be different. It's not, nothing here is written in stone. I don't believe this is the single best way to instantiate a class. Perhaps my primary message or my primary experience over the last few years in doing this is that one just has to be mindful of what one wants students to do, what types of attainment one wants, what types of community interactions would be helpful to attain this, and then design the corresponding incentive structures. And we have multiple examples, but I'll share maybe 2 or time permitting 3 of those. So moving on, so as I said, the first couple of layers, well, there are just videos, short videos interleaved with exercises. And in this case, the incentive structure is a pretty crude one, but effective. So, there are automated exercises interleaved between the videos, and points are deducted for not doing them. And we keep track these, and 95% of the students watch and do most of the exercises before the synchronous sessions start, right? So earlier classrooms, now on Zoom. All right, so now they come to class, or they come to the Zoom session online, and they're assigned into breakout rooms. So 3 students per group. Apparently, research shows 3 is a good number for a group interaction. Anyway, and now they're supposed to collaboratively solve reasonably challenging questions over a period of a week. So they have 2 or 3 sessions. Where they synchronous sessions, which used to be classroom time, but now is time for problem solving with some feedback and so on. So one challenge, at least in the nation context, is to get students to talk to each other in a classroom setting. Like normally, it's viewed as it's a pretty traditional classroom setting. It has been, where the instructor just talks and students are supposed to listen. So how do we start interaction? One thing that was quite useful is what we call dice grading. So at the end of the week, each student in each group is supposed to submit a solution. We randomly select one of those 3 submissions, and every student in that group gets equal points for that particular solution. Now, the incentive structure here is, well, if somebody truly knows the answer, feels like he or she knows the answer, then the incentive is to describe the thought process to the group. Because of the grading mechanism, right? But to balance it, like even though only 20 points were allocated in the course syllabus for this activity, over the course of the semester, there were 50-ish exercises. Every student who actually showed up and participated easily saturated this component of the grade. So it's an example of something where points are used to incentivize positive structure. And indeed, like the vast majority of students attempted every single question that they were assigned, so it's an example of how once you set up the norm, this after a few weeks, they stop worrying quite so much about the how many points they're earning for this, and they start focusing on the content, right? Okay, so a second example. So now they've attempted these solutions for a day or so, and then in the next session, they're expected to start, or actually near the end of the first session, they start posting it on the class forum. This is the Piazza, we use the Piazza class forum as the class forum. And in real time, my teaching assistants in Hong Kong for this class, it was 60+ students, my TAs and I were viewing this forum, giving feedback. We encourage creative solutions. We encourage people to post solutions even if they don't know the answer. Bonus points. So the incentive here is bonus points for solutions or incorrect solutions if they're interesting mistakes or whatever, even if they have trouble solving them. So this systematizes the learning process. It shows people that there are many different ways to crack this particular egg and so on. So, and the conversation ends up being more useful than a clean solution at the end. Students end up liking it quite a lot. We synthesize this discussion. So in the last session of the week, or the penultimate session of the week, we synthesize this, highlight some interesting discussions that have happened, maybe invite some groups to have a discussion. This was done during the class, pre-pandemic. During the pandemic, I would do it on Zoom. And then finally, one final example of I know I'm almost out of time. So one final example of an activity that was able to leverage this community structure. So, so marketplaces are great at distributed learning. And the idea here is, well, so for a review session, each student gets a row of a publicly viewable spreadsheet. Each concept during that week in class is a column, and students are supposed to self-report their level of understanding for that concept. And then every student gets some coupons. These coupons are worth some points, and then they can go seek people to help them. So, you know, they go to different Zoom breakout rooms, they ask for help, and then they report if they got help, and then we give them points. So as an example, just before a midterm exam, in a 2-hour session, students were able to exchange 100, so out of 60 students, like 100 plus concepts were exchanged, 50 plus different questions were exchanged, 2/3 of the students got help. It was viewed as a tremendously positive exercise by all the students, right? All right, so there's a few others, but I won't highlight those. Let me just land on this slide over here. Basically, I view the driving mechanism of truly, engaged classrooms being valuable in getting like a superlative student achievement. And it's been challenging for all of us to do this in a pandemic world where we're all just online, but I do believe it can be done with the right technologies, and I've seen wonderful examples by the other speakers. Let me stop there.
Thank you, Sid. There's some really useful kind of teaching strategies there. There are some questions coming in.
Yes.
So first of all, how do you assign the groups of 3 when working together?
Yeah, so our over time we've realized that, or we feel, and we have data to back it up, that it's best to let students first try to find their own groups. If they have trouble, we help them assign them, but we monitor them. If there are groups that are struggling, then we gently intervene. We have a discussion. We say, well, it seems like some of you are having trouble. Would you mind if we do some reassignments and so on? So since the idea is to leverage community structures, instead of mandating that people who may not get along with each other have to work with each other, we prefer to let them first try to find their own communities, but then also monitor. I think that seems to work reasonably well.
Okay. Another question regarding the DICE grading.
Yes.
How do you ensure that students explain their answers rather than just copying from each other? So they were expected to submit 3 different solutions, weren't they?
It's a fair statement. So as a benchmark, when we first started doing this, in homeworks, that was often what, at least in our context, that's often what would end up happening. And then if we had a rule about no plagiarism, we would have to fight it. Here we explicitly allow that, but from our point of view, what we used to observe in the in-class sessions was that, well, if they're sitting next to each other, if they don't understand a step, well, at least they'll ask that, right? And we would have been walking around with them, so then we would have noticed something happen. We would notice discussions happening. If a group was particularly quiet, we would go talk to them. So those are the advantages of a flipped classroom. In a Zoom setting, we flipped between the different Zoom breakout rooms, and then we try to get a conversation started. So our expectations are low, but even if they end up purely copying, my view is just the role of writing something down is also more valuable than, so we only accept written solutions. We don't accept, typewritten solutions or anything like that. So there's value in at least doing that baseline amount of work.
And what's the advantage of getting them to each submit a solution rather than working together to produce one solution?
So if they had only submitted a single solution, then it is quite possible that someone who is perhaps a little bit more competent or feels more confident would have done the whole work, and nobody else would have engaged. Here, the idea is, well, at least everyone in their own handwriting has to submit a solution. So at least a baseline amount of work has to happen, right? I mean, it's simple-minded, but seems to work.
Okay, thank you again, Sid. We're just about out of time. I'm going to just hand over to Rob before we go to the break.
All right.
So thank you, Claire, and thank you, Siddharth, again. And also, once again, thanks to Stephen for those talks. Again, lots of interesting things highlighted there. Siddharth, I particularly like the mate idea. I'd be interested in looking at that in a bit more detail, without doubt. So again, just to emphasize, we are taking a break now, and it'll be another 15-minute break. So we'll be back at 12:10 for our final 2 talks of the workshop. take this time to, again, fill up your coffee mugs, your tea, and we'll see you when you get back. And of course, in the meantime, feel free to continue the engagement on Padlet in the chat. And we'll see you in 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay, welcome back everyone. This is the final session, so we've got 2 more talks coming up, and we're going to start off by heading over to Maynooth University over in Ireland. We've got James O'Malley, he's going to be leading the talk, and he's going to be doing the talk with Pádraig O'Haraha and Rachel O'Neill, so take it away.
Thank you. Thanks a million, Lawrence, and thanks a million to everybody else so far. It's been really interesting day. Actually, so much of what we'll talk about in this talk, we might need to revisit after some of the ideas we've gotten. But myself and Pádraig are going to outline some steps we took in Maynooth University. Myself and Rachel O'Neill have been involved in a project over the last year to try and help retention of computer science students in mathematics. And Pádraig is one of the lecturers who's run a study group initiative, or a group initiative with one of his lectures. So the study group initiative that we started, we set it up in last year, in the first semester of last year, and it was part of a Higher Education Authority funded project. The Higher Education Authority ran a report and found that retention rates among computer science students were quite low. Across the sector, they were about 55%. And the low levels of retention were related to low engagement in mathematics. So part of our project in Maynooth University is aimed at improving the computer science students' engagement with maths. And one of the ways we did this was by setting up a study group initiative in the Math Support Centre. So we had groups of about 4 to 5 first and second year computer science students who met weekly in the Math Support Centre. And the intention was to create more structured and proactive learning communities. We focus grouped some previous computer science students before the project began. And by speaking to them and looking at some of the data, we found that computer science students were actually engaging almost on par with their peers, but their quality of engagement wasn't as good. So they were submitting as many assignments, but their marks were lower. They were attending the MSc as often, but spending less time there. So part of the goal of these study groups was to improve their quality of engagement when they sit down to do maths. The groups were student led, so students were responsible for arranging their times, meeting up in person in the MSc, and leading the discussion. So what did they work on that week? What did they have trouble with, etc. But a tutor, myself or Rachel, checked in with them once a week, make sure that everything was going okay and that they were working correctly. So attendance was optional, and across first semester and start of second semester, we had 11 groups signing up in total. Some preliminary data from the end of the first semester was quite encouraging. The study group mean, so their mean grade in their first calculus course was substantially higher when compared to non-study group people. But even regardless of that, some of the feedback that we got was quite positive in terms of the engagement. So students reported feeling more confident about maths and being more confident to work on it on their own at home, and a bit of that community responsibility as well. So some of them reported making sure that they had work done before they come into their study group, so that they had something to talk about with the group and to contribute to the group. So all that was extremely encouraging. And much like everything else, everything was going swimmingly until the COVID lorry rolled into town. So Maynooth University campus closed down on the 13th of March. And departmental tutorials and MSc support, so Math Support Centre support as well, moved online to Microsoft Teams and online Moodle forums, which is our virtual learning environment. We made moves to move our study groups online, but unfortunately these weren't successful. Sign up for the actual online study groups was extremely low, and by that I mean nobody, unfortunately. But that did follow a similar trend of low engagement across all supports. So tutorials, MSc drop-in, online forums, engagement with all of these supports was extremely low. So naturally enough, when we moved to this coming year, we wanted to look into this and see how we might improve the engagement. So the department surveyed tutors at the end of the year to see their experience of online support. There were some pros, but there were a lot of cons as well. One of the pros is one of the things that came up earlier today, actually. Those students that, while there was low engagement, those students that did engaged very well and engaged more often. And there were other helpful things. Tutors been able to share their screen on Teams, meetings could be recorded, etc. But of course, there were the usual cons. Connectivity problems were an issue, and of course, the inability to see students' work. But with some of the talk that's gone on with collaborative whiteboards, etc., I'll be interested to look into some of those things. So looking ahead to this year, we're planning to move our study groups online to Microsoft Teams. Now, Stephen did a really good outline of this in a talk there just before the break, so I won't bore you with the details of Teams too much, but there's just two things. The tabs at the very, very top, I'm sorry if that's a bit small, but essentially at the top there is a Files tab there where lecturers or students within their own team can upload files, upload work. So you could take a picture on your phone, upload it to the Files tab where your private team could take a look. The channels on the left-hand side is what Porrick is going to chat a bit about now. And this is going to be really important for our study groups. So Porrick, I'll throw it across to you to talk a bit about the private channels that you ran.
Yeah, thanks, James. Hi, everyone. So like James mentioned at the start, I was teaching a CERT course last semester, and this was how I recreated my class environment in MS Teams. So pre-COVID, I would usually start my class just like a regular lecture. It would just be myself talking in front of the class, in front of a blackboard. And to recreate this in MS Teams is actually pretty straightforward. You can just start a meeting with everybody in the general channel. But after that, I normally wanted to get students into small groups, and then they would work on some problems related to the material we just covered. And then I would just walk around the classroom and answer any questions that students had. And to recreate that in MS Teams, I set up these private groups there. And this is actually the part that James and Rachel will be recreating for their study group. So there was about 4 to 5 students in each of these groups. And because they're private, a student can only see a group that I assign to them. So when I'm telling everybody that it's time to go into these groups, they all know exactly where to go because they can only see one option for them. So it kind of it streamlines that side of it. Looking at a bit closer into these groups, just looking at, you can see here in group A, you can see that the students themselves have set up their own meetings. And in these meetings, they would share files and talk to each other about a problem sheet that was based on the material we just covered in the general meeting with everybody. And I would periodically jump in and out of each meeting to answer questions that people had, just like I would do in a normal classroom setting. I found these private study groups to have much more engagement actually than the traditional lecture styles. There might be a few reasons for that, but I think one of the reasons was that I actually knew the students pretty well by the time we moved into online teaching. So I could actually group the students together with people that I already knew they were pretty comfortable with. So this kind of created a nice friendly environment inside these private groups. And the feedback from students was also pretty positive on these small groups. A lot of the students told me that they were more comfortable asking questions in front of a small group, especially of their peers, as opposed to just asking the question, not only in front of me, but in front of the entire class. They found just a small group is a lot less intimidating to pose questions and discussion. So that's really all I want to say. Just before I pass it back to James, I wanted just to mention quickly that there are other apps out there with a similar functionality to this. I know breakout rooms is used quite a bit in Zoom, and they are quite similar. But I would say like a big advantage that the MS Teams has over Zoom is that any of the files that students shared in a session or any chat logs, they will remain in those groups for when they return. So it's more like a private workspace in that sense, and it's a lot more permanent than some of the breakout rooms that other apps have. Yeah, but that's all I want to say. I'll pass you back to James now.
Super. Thanks a million, Porrick. Yeah, so our plans for next year, based off some of that, we are planning to move our computer science study groups online to Microsoft Teams, and the department is also planning to expand these study groups to all first year students to get them involved. Part of the theory of that is, as we said, when students eventually come to engage with these online supports, then they engage more often and well. So it was one of the bits of feedback came up in our focus groups as well, and it's if you can get students engaged early, they will engage more later on. So we are going to move the computer science ones online to Microsoft Teams. Students will be signed up, and just like Porrick's system there, they'll be put into private channels within a single team that they can use as a collaborative space. So they can run private meetings within that channel where they can discuss ideas with their peers. As Porrick said, they're working in small groups. They feel more comfortable asking questions, and tutors will drop into these channels once a week. So the idea would be that myself and Rachel would have a specified time to check in with one of these meetings. But our hope would be, of course, that even outside of those meeting time with tutors, that students would use the team as a private meeting space in their own time as well. Because one of the big benefits, as Porrick said, there is that the team remains there permanently. Our existing face-to-face model will be maintained with regards prep work. Students will know that they're expected to come with some work done to discuss. And they can share their screens if they can, or discuss work by placing photos in the files tab. So there'll be a files tab within their own private team that only their team can see the work that's put into it. And as was mentioned earlier on, we might look into some of those collaborative whiteboards or maybe OneNote as well. And tutors can monitor attendance via logs. So within a meeting, it is possible to download the attendance. The idea would be we would be able to intervene early if students start to become disengaged in the groups. Just for anybody using Teams, it might be worth noting that those attendance logs at the moment can only be downloaded as the meeting is going on. But I've been told it's in development by Microsoft that those logs will be able to be downloaded afterwards. So hopefully that will be coming in the future, maybe useful for monitoring the engagement. Yeah, I think that's about everything we have to say. There's some contact information if you want to contact any of us. Otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, James and Parag, for that. Really interesting, particularly from my own point of view, in the sense that I'm not very familiar with Teams. So there's lots of things there, potential, I think, for people to look at. One kind of question stroke comment that has come in is about the perceived relevance, if you like, of mathematics, particularly for computer science students. Have you done things to try and adapt, how you kind of pitch the relevance of mathematics in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the computer science department, there are two other tutors over there that are kind of like our ICT project cousins, and they're working on, again, ICT retention within the computer science department. And we worked with them to draw up a document about the relevance of each of the computer science studies modules in their maths modules and vice versa. So we also made up a list of the modules that computer science studies students would be doing and the relevance of each of mathematical topics in those. Some of the feedback that we got from previous computer science studies students was that by the time they got to fourth year of computer science, they saw the relevance of maths, but in first and second year, they didn't. So one of the things we're trying to tackle is to find the relevance that they saw in their fourth year and communicating that to the first and second years. And we hope to do that through lectures, and we've forwarded those documents to the lecturers so that they can drive that home to their students as well.
Another question is around the kind of initial introduction to Teams. As I said, I'm not very experienced in myself, but others, as one comment in particular has mentioned how the initial kind of introduction seemed to be a little bit unintuitive and clunky for students. Have you done anything to try and help students, or do you have any suggestions how to help overcome some of that, perhaps?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I suppose for our students who've already been with us, they've been used to Microsoft Teams when they used it last year. We didn't do anything, I suppose, in second semester last year when everything moved to Teams online. I think, like everyone else, we were caught a bit on the hop with any induction training or anything. But certainly for this year, when we do orientation for our study groups, they will be taken into a group and given a more thorough run through, a bit like the one we've done there. I know what you mean in terms of the layout of it. We found it a bit unintuitive to start, but it's certainly one of those things when you get used to it, it makes real sense. Particularly what Porrick was talking about was the channels. That was something for a long time we were doing everything in what they call the general channel, which is everybody in your team in the one place. But a bit like what Stephen mentioned earlier on, splitting your channels up into a general announcements channel, a forum for students to talk with each other, maybe one to post resources. Splitting it up and segmenting it there kind of makes it a lot less daunting, I feel, for engaging and working in it. So that'd be the best bit of advice I would have.
There is a kind of a follow-up as well about the groups and what you were saying there about setting up those kind of almost permanent groups throughout. One of the earlier speakers mentioned the idea that in the first instance, students were able to set up their own groups. Is that possible, or is that predetermined?
So in terms of our study groups, absolutely. We encourage students to come to us with pre-formed study groups if they want to remain with friends, etc. So if they contact us, we can very simply add them into the team and add them into a private channel. That's no problem. In a more general sense, as long as you have Office 365 and the Teams app, you can set up your own private teams as well. So that's not a problem if students want to do that privately. But from our point of view, if there are pre-formed groups that come to us, it's extremely easy. It's just a case of getting an email and signing them up into the private groups.
Okay, thank you. As I said, perhaps one extra comment is that we certainly witnessed a drop-off in all the supports that were available over lockdown as well. So you're not alone in that sense.
Yeah, we're glad. It's not just me.
But it's really interesting about how then, to try and still encourage that kind of collaborative approach, which I think is obviously essential.
Yeah.
And using some of the functionalities in Teams to develop that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I mean, I think there's definitely opportunities to even do some things better than what we were doing in face-to-face, and I think, yeah, we found that Teams, and I know Porrick has found Teams really, really good for some of those things.
Okay, thank you both very much.
Thanks a million. Thank you.
I'll pass back to Claire.
Thank you.
Lawrence is taking this session.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right.
Claire was in my videos. I could see Claire's video. That's why. Sorry.
It's okay, Rob. Thank you again to James and Porrick for that. Mark, can you get your screen shared?
Yep.
Do you need a minute to set up, or are you ready to go?
Just a minute, just a quick minute. Let's see. I'll share my screen with you just now.
Okay, while Mark does that, I'll quick reminder that the Padlet's still open. The Padlet is going to stay open after the session as well. So the Padlet is there forever. You can bookmark that. And if you want to return to discussion or return to a couple of points that were made, feel free to look at that whenever you want. But the conversation continues after we finish today. I will just give Mark a minute to get himself set up. You ready to go?
I think I'm pretty good to go.
In that case, we will end off, finish up with our final talk, which is by Mark Wilkinson, my colleague at Nottingham Trent University, and he's going to talk about using YouTubers and Twitch streamers for inspiration in our teaching. So
Okay, thanks, Lawrence. Okay, it's a real pleasure to be here speaking in front of all of you today. It's been a really lovely workshop, and I'm really happy to bring my small contribution to the table. So my name is Mark. I'm a lecturer in maths at Nottingham Trent University. I just arrived here 6 months ago, more or less at the start of the pandemic. Before I was here, I was postdocing in Paris, in New York, and also in Edinburgh. And at the moment, I've really only got about 5 years of teaching experience under my belt. So I'm a relative whippersnapper when it comes to classroom teaching. But whenever I can, I like to use elements of technology in teaching if I believe they have some didactic value. And I think one thing I'd like to share with you today is, as the title suggests, the practices of YouTubers and Twitch streamers. For us as educators in mathematics, what is it they're doing well, what is it they're doing really well, and how might we try to build that into our practice moving forward? Okay, so let's get this moving. Okay, so what can you see here on the screen? To explain what a YouTuber or a Twitch streamer is, what you can see here is one of my favorite streamers, Seth, playing a game called Magic: The Gathering. And he's doing so in a piece of software whose virtues I will sing about in this talk. It's really a small love letter really to a piece of software called Streamlabs. So Seth here is using Streamlabs to live stream this card game Magic: The Gathering and effectively educate his viewers, of whom there are thousands, how to play the game. You'll see there are several elements on the screen. I'll break that down as the talk moves forward, but Streamlabs is the piece of software that he is using to make contact with his audience, and you'll see much more of that in just a few minutes' time. Okay. So this talk is pretty short. What is it that I really want to talk about? So really 3 main things. I'd like to talk about the hardware that some of these Twitch streamers and YouTubes use, along with the software that they use to really reach and grab their audience. It's quite a dynamic space where people are creating and people are constantly innovating, coming up with new ideas. And I think it's really interesting to use Twitch in particular as a window into good practice for communicating with our audiences online. And then just as an overarching theme, just thinking about things abstractly, thinking about how to use these good practices in the teaching and learning mathematics online. Okay, so as you might imagine, none of my students is going to be logging on to watch me play video games. Rather, they'll be logging on to watch me do some good old-fashioned mathematics. And you'll be using lots of different resources in the meantime. So you might notice, I hope you can see quite clearly, that I am at the bottom of the screen. My feed is superimposed onto whatever it is I'm using in the background. And this piece of software, Streamlabs, that I mentioned at the very start, is very, very good at manipulating and somehow pulling together all the various resources you'll be using. So you'll notice in particular, I'm representing Nottingham Trent University at the top. That's a little widget that you can turn on and off at will. So you may well find something a little more instructive in your classes to use there. But of course, during your classes, you'll be doing various different things. You might want to toggle on the lecture notes that you were using in the previous week's lecture, highlight something in particular in the lecture notes in a non-clumsy manner. Similarly, you might want to bring up this week's tutorial or seminar sheet, focus in on a question and use that as a way by which to enter a discussion into how to solve the problem under consideration. And you might also look to use solution sheets and talk students through solution sheets. As you might see here, this looks a little bit like the kind of thing that Steve Watson was talking about before. This is just a solution sheet to a problem sheet that I had last year, made in Microsoft Word, which is a fantastic piece of software if you have a graphics tablet to hand draw mathematics. And also one particularly useful feature which you can toggle on and toggle off is a chat feature. So all I've done is pull this off the Zoom chat at the moment, and you can do this with other platforms. You can do it with Microsoft Teams, Skype, whichever other chat functionality you might have. And in this way, you can, at least for me, have a dynamic interaction with students, especially if they're on the shyer side. They don't like to speak up, they don't like their video displayed, and they'd rather keep their questions anonymous. But these are things that you can toggle on and toggle off. Similarly, hopefully this will work. Let's just see if technology is kind to me today. Okay. You can also, and someone raised this before about PowerPoints being ever so slightly awkward to use with regards to inking. So what I'm doing just now is I'm using a graphics tablet, nothing too expensive. And all I'm doing is looking at a slide. Here I am, I'm talking to my students, introducing Fredholm integral equations of the second kind, which is certainly what I'll be doing with my students this semester. And you can write quite nice and cleanly on these slides, not too much of a problem. And it seems as though the thickness, one or two people mentioned about the thickness this morning of PowerPoint with regards to writing on the slides, seems to be doing not too bad a job. So I hope you agree that all of this so far has been relatively seamless. It's a matter of clicks from moving from one thing to the next. I'm not dragging windows across the screen. It's all quite nice. And the way that I'm doing this is via Streamlabs, this wonderful piece of free software that most Twitchers and YouTubers use to organize either synchronous or asynchronous content. Okay, so I've used the words YouTube and Twitch. I don't think I need to comment on the most famous video repository in the world, YouTube, unless you've been living under a rock for the past 10 years. Twitch, however, especially amongst academics, is perhaps lesser known. So what is Twitch? Well, it's a company owned by Amazon, and quite simply, it's a live streaming platform on which streamers are watched playing video games. Now, you might wonder how such a thing exists and how it propagates and how it's profitable, but we're not going to get into that. It's really the numbers that I'm interested in. So with regards to people producing content on this platform, there were 3.9 million unique streamers active in February 2020 this year. And on average, there are about 140 million users, people who log in to watch these videos every month. And people who stream on Twitch, many of them, this is their career. They do this to get paid via various avenues of monetization. And of course, they are trying to do everything they possibly can to maximize their audiences, maximize their impact so they can survive and stay afloat. So there's a kind of Darwinian process going on with regards to Twitch, that the best rise to the top and the low fall and fail. So for this reason, I think as a resource for us just to dip into and see what people are doing, it's a really fantastic place to go. So I warmly encourage any of you who is interested to go to Twitch in your free time and explore what people are doing there. But with regards to resources, I'd say YouTube is better for thinking about asynchronous content, pre-recorded material. There's already a lot of good mathematics material, in fact, on YouTube, which you can access at your leisure for some inspiration for your classes. But with regards to synchronous activities, so streaming activities, Twitch is really where to go. It's really where it's at. So that's the divide in terms of the platforms, both asynchronous and synchronous resources. Okay, I'm just going to introduce one case study of a guy whom I particularly admire. So this chap here, Saffron Olive, that's his Twitch handle. He is known for playing this card game that I previously showed, Magic the Gathering. He's employed by a company known as MTG Goldfish just to play Magic and have people watch him play Magic. So in some sense, MTG Goldfish is playing the role of the university. So universities are paying us to do mathematics. And what this chap has been doing for years and years and years has been accruing a large audience. He's got about 200,000 subscribers, which implies his reach actually is far greater than any of ours sadly can be as academics. But what he's been doing for years is producing both asynchronous content in the form of YouTube videos and synchronous content by streaming on Twitch once or twice a week. And his schedule actually mirrors quite closely the schedule of an academic in terms of only producing during the working week and the frequency with which he produces these videos. So I think he's quite a good case study to look at his content, to see how he manages his affairs and gets really good stuff online to inspire his audience. Now, my approach that I'm taking here in this talk kind of mirrors what he has been doing for several years. So if you just have a quick look at this still frame, you'll notice there are several elements to the page that I've highlighted. Some of you might not like it, but I find it's been helpful teaching so far. There's a little webcam output at the bottom, so you can both see the content behind, which in our case would be mathematics, and also a face, so you get some facial expressions, which hopefully makes the video a little bit more engaging. You get the option, as I mentioned before, to put in widgets or things like chat boxes, which I think are a fantastic way by which to interact with your students in real time. And also, if you want to try to keep the process anonymous, I think that's a really fantastic additional tool to help keep everything nice and dynamic. And here, you know, the guy's keeping track of who's winning, who's losing. You might look to put in poll information here. You might look to put in future questions, whatever it is. I mean, really, your imagination is the limit here with regards to what you can include in this stream using Streamlabs. So overall, what's the connection with teaching and learning maths online? Well, I claim that these repositories, both Twitch and YouTube, are really good resources for people who are professional. They've been doing this for 10 years, 5-10 years. So unlike us who are just really getting up and running, these people have been doing it for a long time and getting paid to do this for a long time. So you can go there, have a look at both asynchronous and synchronous content and see really what the standard is for many young people observing these things. These people are really good, they're really dynamic, many of them have really nice personalities. So again, it's good to get an idea as to what hooks students. More appropriately to what I'm going to say towards the end of the talk, if you dig in a little bit more deeply, you can see quite clearly there's a modern software and hardware framework that is super appropriate, really nice, in which to roll out mathematics both in real time and have material pre-recorded. And for those of you who are really brave and bold and to whom it matters, if you work with these kind of platforms and corresponding software, there's additional opportunity for you to really engage via social media, to advertise your lectures on social media to your students and to accrue some followers along the way, and thereby kind of keeping the bond that you have with your students as nice and friendly as you might hope it to be. And I suppose the reason why I'm using Twitch and YouTube for inspiration in my own teaching is that I'm adopting an axiom here, of course, a naive axiom, but the axiom, which are called the TALMO axiom, is that undergraduates that we're teaching now spent their formative years consuming content on platforms such as YouTube and Twitch. So even subconsciously, they've got standards. They've been seeing things year after year, and whether we like it or not, we have a bar perhaps to reach, and just dipping our toe in the water now might help us understand, you know, the levels that we need to perhaps hit in order to engage with students. But of course, there's a danger. You don't want to look like the guy who's trying to be cool to students by using modern technology. So you have to be a little bit subtle about it and how you employ this kind of stuff moving forward. So that's something very, very important to be mindful of. So going back to my favorite streamer, Saffron Olive, just keeping an idea as to how he keeps his schedule. One thing that he does that I think is lovely is that he produces short videos every week, maybe less than 5 minutes in length, that advertises what's coming ahead for the week so that students can maybe get their mind in place as to what's coming next. That's really lovely. And he accompanies that with ever so slightly longer videos of about 50 minutes, which for us might be something like lectures, or perhaps less, depending on what you're considering doing moving forward. But really, where he shines comes in Twitch streams. The way in which he engages his audience using chat functionality, also polls he uses to use suggestions and interact with his audience is another really positive thing. And he pulls this all together using Streamlabs. So I'll see if I can just very briefly towards the end, see if I can share Streamlabs here just now. So Streamlabs at the moment, which I hope you can see, is this client, and it's free. The learning curve is very low for it, and there are hundreds of YouTube videos available with brief tutorials to help you get up and running. It's essentially, as I said, just a content manager. It allows you to pull lots of different sources into one place and have a nice seamless process without dragging too many things around, and have things look quite nice and slick. Okay, let me return very quickly to my original screen. Here we go. Okay, what hardware would you need just very quickly to finish up? Well, it's very much up to you how much you're willing to spend, although you can do this relatively inexpensively. Obviously having screens, hopefully everyone's got screens. I got mine from a charity shop, 2 of them for a total of £15, so it can be quite cheap. Having a good quality camera is a good way to connect with your students. Having grainy photo quality is not good. They want to see things in good quality. And along with that, having a good microphone is quite a good practice too. So your voice is clean, clear, crisp, and there's not much muffling going on. Good lighting can also accompany a really positive streaming experience. And if you're super fancy, although I don't recommend this one per se, getting a Stream Deck to additionally manage your content. So you can maybe have a little look online as to what a Stream Deck really is. Graphics tablets, additionally for mathematicians, really good. Wacom is by far the leader in the field. I warmly recommend what they do. And if you're super keen doing what I'm doing just now, having your video superimposed on the screen, a green screen is also really good to have as part of your kit. Software, again, this is a love letter to Streamlabs. It's free, download it, start playing with it, see what it can do for you. I can't recommend it highly or warmly enough. Go there and try it out. Here you can look back to see a list of software that I myself use from a day-to-day basis. And as I said, claimed before, this is not expensive. This is something you can do by going to charity shops, even going on eBay and Gumtree, sourcing some of the pieces of kit that you might need to really optimize your teaching. And then just very quickly to finish up, who else is doing this? There are some mathematicians out there who are aware of the Twitch space and are using them for inspiration. One chap here is Matt Solomon at Bridgewater State University. This is his details. You can perhaps see what he's been doing. And this is rather recent for me. So I attended a really wonderful online event yesterday from the ICMS. It was on using the internet, using online space to deliver engagement events. And this was led by, in the UK, the pretty well-known Katie Steckles and Ben Sparks. Their event is fantastic. If you ever get the chance to do it, sign up, you won't regret it. It's really, really fantastic. So there are people out there thinking along similar lines. It's a really exciting time to explore these technologies. And I think with that whirlwind 13 minutes or 14 minutes out of the way, I'll thank you for your attention. Good luck for the upcoming semester. And yep, any questions?
That's great. Thank you very much, Mark. You've already answered a couple of questions because I was aware of Streamlabs, but I was always concerned about the learning curve. So given your endorsement, I think I'm going to look back at it again, at very least.
So I think this was quite an intense talk, and there's obviously quite a lot in it, but this is pre-recorded, so you can look back, see what I was talking about, and try to connect the dots by yourself in your free time if this is something you want to pursue. But yes, Streamlabs is really a doddle, not tricky at all to use.
So a question that has come in is it right that it's built on OBS? Because
that's correct. OBS. That's right. It's OBS Streamlabs. That's correct. Yeah.
So if somebody was using a Mac, they could still use that as the kind of a basic. Is that right?
That's right. I believe that Streamlabs itself is Windows only, so that would be a barrier to Mac users. But yes, there are alternative solutions for those who use Mac. That's right.
And are there any advantages over Streamlabs itself over OBS, or is that something you haven't considered?
That's actually not something I've explored. That's a pretty good question. All I can say is that Streamlabs really met my needs, and I don't even use everything that it has to offer. But yeah, I can't really offer a good answer to that. I'd be happy if anyone in the chat has ideas on
that. There's also been a few questions specifically about Twitch. And do you know, does it have capabilities of live subtitles and captioning, for example?
That is also a good question. I can't quite say, but what I can say is that you can use Streamlabs through Microsoft Teams, for instance. This is something you can just share your screen. So Streamlabs, what effectively does is it prints out in a single screen something that you want to show your class, and then you can simply share that screen via Microsoft Teams or whichever other platform you're using. And I believe the functionality for subtitles is available in these platforms, so that's maybe something that could be looked into. But with regards to Twitch, there might be some issues if you want to live stream. You need to make sure you do it in the correct sub channel, has to be educational. And I have heard stories of some people having their Twitches pulled down simply because because according to those who run Twitch, you're doing things which don't align with their principles. So you need to be ever so slightly careful with that. I think for me, the best marriage is Streamlabs alongside things like Microsoft Teams or Zoom. That's really where you can avoid these kind of issues conflicting with the content providers.
And can Twitch content, can that be like pre-recorded as well, or is that just for synchronous?
I believe it can be pre-recorded. I don't think there's anything stopping you doing that. I think the main point is interactivity is the focus on Twitch. So if you're just uploading a video and there's no interaction, again, you may get some of the moderators saying, listen, this is just a video, why is there no active interaction? But I don't think there's anything stopping you whatsoever from doing that. But I have to say, with regards to pre-recorded content, Streamlabs, there's a record button. You can hit it and it just captures your screen with all the bits and pieces all pulled together. And then you can simply upload immediately without any further editing to your favorite university portal.
A bit more of a technical question. You highlighted about the different kit, for example, and there was a question, do you have any recommendations in terms of size of green screen?
I suppose the bigger the better. I think what dictates the size is how close your camera is to the green screen itself. They are pretty inexpensive things. I mean, you can pick them up on sites such as Amazon for a tenner or less. They're not a lot. Even nice ones that come in a case that retracts, so you can just pull the handle up and then it locks the green screen into place. You can pick these up for 40 quid. So I know that money for some people might be tight, and also money in budgets in universities is not obviously overflowing just now, but you can pick these items up relatively inexpensively, especially if you go on eBay or Amazon and look to buy secondhand.
Okay, great. Thank you once again. There certainly has got a few comments now coming in the chat as well about things that are coming through in terms of OBS and Mac users and everything else. And I think there's lots there for people to kind of revisit. So thank you very much, Mark.
No, thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone. I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I'd just like to make a few closing remarks, only going to be 5 minutes before we head off. The first thing I would like to do, I'm about to post into the chat a Google Forms. It's just an evaluation for the day, so a couple of questions and then a free text thing at the end. It'd be really nice if we could give some feedback to the speakers afterwards about what things they've said that people are planning on using in their own practice. It'd be excellent for the speakers to have that kind of information so they can use that for case studies for professional recognition and CPD, all that kind of thing. So it'd be great if you'd all be willing to fill out that form and sort of close that loop as a way of thanking the speakers. I would like to thank all of the speakers myself, particularly Amanda for staying up late in Australia, and I believe she is still with us, so she's taken up a whole Thursday evening to stick around on this. But a massive thanks to all of the speakers who've got involved and made this event happen. A big thanks to my co-organisers, Claire and Rob. Rob has done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of getting in touch with all the speakers and making sure that everything's going to run smoothly. And Claire very much set this thing up. It was Claire's idea in the first place, and she drafted me and Robin following a call out at the first TALMO event. So this was completely her brainchild. And a big thanks to the guys at TALMO as well, Michael, Rachel and Kevin and their affiliated organisations, the LMS, the IMA and the RSS. And just to finish off, Kevin, I think would like to say a few words as well, and then we'll let you all go and have some lunch and enjoy the rest of the day.
Right. Okay. Well, hello again, everybody. First of all, I'd like to say thanks to all the speakers, and of course, thanks to the organisers, Claire, Lawrence, and Rob. And it's good to see that there's now a TALMO axiom from the last talk. That was a good thing to see. I just want to remind you that we will be doing something on exams on the 18th, and there'll be another slightly bigger session on the 21st on sort of lab type work for computing. So I think I should hand over to Rachel and Michael if they want to say something, but thanks to everybody for coming, of course. Thanks to all the speakers, but hand over to Michael or Rachel. Do you want to say something?
No, I can just echo what you said, really, in terms of I've really enjoyed this session. It's been a brilliant whistle-stop tour around various bits that I can take a lot from as well. So thank you again to all the speakers, and particularly thanks to Rob, Claire and Lawrence for putting the whole thing together. I suspect Michael possibly doesn't want to turn on his camera at the moment because he's in an interesting situation, which we won't go into, but he can do if he wants. But otherwise, thanks to everyone for attending this. It's always good after the summer to know that so many people still want to come back and there's an appetite for these sorts of sessions as well. So great to see you all, and best of luck with term coming up too. I don't know if Michael does want to say anything. I suspect he doesn't. Nah, we're not going to let him speak. It's best not to let him speak, I feel.
Right, well, okay then, if nobody else wants to say anything, I'd like to just say, well, thank you all for attending. We'll see you all again next time.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks. Right, so I'm going to kill the feed to